A Catholic Overview of the Bible, the video program number 10. When the pictures appear to be very red like this one, it's because they are taken from old slides that seem to have a propensity to turn red. In the evening, Jews gather at a remnant left of the Temple of Herod, the Wailing Wall, which we have visited in other video programs. In Jesus' lifetime, the temple built by King Herod for the Jews was still under construction. His disciples were puzzled when Jesus prophesied that of this great building not one stone would stand upon another. Actually, the lower courses of this wall is only a part of the retaining wall, not part of the temple itself. In less than 40 years after his death and only 6 years after it was completed, the whole complex was destroyed by the Romans in 70 A.D. in response to the first Jewish rebellion. Fervent Jews still pray for the rebuilding of the temple and the restoration of Israel under the law of Moses with its sacrificial system. So prayers are left in niches of the Wailing Wall. But Jesus declared that he was the temple. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And all of the Jewish sacrifices for sins ceased with the destruction of the temple. So significantly for Christians, the sacrifice of Jesus, the Lamb of God, remains as the only expiation for the sins of the whole world. On this map of Israel, we see the relationship of the major places of Jesus' life. He never traveled more than 125 miles south to north. He preached mostly around the Sea of Galilee, with his residence in Capernaum on the north shore. Seeming to look for rest, he once went to Sidon, outside of Jewish territory, into what is now Lebanon. He traveled through unfriendly Samaria at least once, lower middle of this map in large type, and he knew Jerusalem, Jericho, and Bethany near the very bottom. The usual road between Jerusalem and Galilee was along the east side of the Jordan in what is now the country of Jordan. He was born in Bethlehem, which is on the very edge of the bottom of the map, and was reared in Nazareth. To find it, look inland to the left from the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. Caesar Augustus, first king of Rome to be called divine, decreed all the world would be enrolled, which sent Joseph with Mary to Bethlehem. The hills and fields of Bethlehem are shown here in June, which is wheat harvest time, but can be imagined on that night when the sky suddenly filled with a heavenly host, startling shepherds and sending them on a quest for a newborn child in a manger. The place where both King David and Jesus, the greater son of David, was born has long seen Christian devotion. Over the centuries, many churches and monasteries have been built there. This is the southeastern hill of the city of Bethlehem. In the 4th century, St. Jerome, who wrote the Vulgate version of the Scriptures, settled here with a company of monks to live and study. Inside the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, in the semi-darkness, glows all the many tributes to the birth of Jesus that different Christian sects have made to honor him. The church is actually partitioned into sectors by the different groups who jealously claim its parts. Nazareth is built on a height overlooking the Esdraelon Valley. An aerial view of modern Nazareth shows the Church of the Annunciation, believed to be built over the house of Mary. These valleys and hills were well known to Jesus in his youth and in his ministry. Another view of Nazareth. Off of one of these promontories, the good people of Nazareth meant to throw Jesus off for his claiming to be a prophet, but without honor in his own town. The Church of the Annunciation, built on the site of Gabriel's visit to the Blessed Virgin Mary in 1955, was just the last of a succession of churches built on this site. Though very large, it seems to lack something in beauty. In the crypt below is a grotto built over part of the house where Our Lady lived. The interior of the Church of the Annunciation is decorated by a series of panels given by all the countries of the world. This sculpture of the Virgin Mary was presented by the United States. From Nazareth, a few more miles to the east, we reach the baptismal site of Jesus in the Jordan River, just south of the Sea of Galilee. It was here that John the Baptist was calling people to repentance in preparation for He who is to come. After his baptism, Jesus traveled down the Jordan on foot to these cliffs east of Jericho. This is the traditional site of the Mount of Temptation, the wilderness where Jesus fasted for 40 days and resisted the temptations of Satan. Visitors today, after a steep climb, arrive in an old Orthodox monastery perched on the side of the mountain and maintained by a lone Greek Orthodox monk and his wife. Another view of that Greek monastery perched on the Mount of Temptation. Several churches mark the site in Cana where Jesus' ministry began with the prompting of his mother at the wedding feast to turn water into wine. It is a town in the Galilee district. Galilee, the home area of Jesus, is very beautiful country, supporting sheep, orchards, and vineyards. Fish from the sea supported many families in the time of Jesus. A common fish is still called today Peter's fish. Jesus would often go up into the Galilean hills to pray. Here we look across the lake to the country of the Gerasenes, where the man possessed by demons was healed by Jesus. The demons, sent into a herd of swine, plunged down into the lake and drowned. A favorite excursion for tourists is to take one of these boats from Tiberias across the lake to Capernaum. On a calm day, the water is placid, but the lake is known for turbulent storms that come up quickly. The lake is often hung with moisture of evaporating water. At the foot of these hills lies the small village of Magdala, where Mary Magdalene lived and came from when she followed Jesus. To the north, as we pass along the lake, is the hillside where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, marked by a church just to be seen above the vineyards. Left behind as we go across the lake is the modern city of Tiberias on the west shore, newly built in Jesus' time by Herod Antipas, the Herod who had John the Baptist beheaded. There's no record of Jesus ever visiting Tiberias. He avoided large cities, other than Jericho and Jerusalem, preferring to stay in the countryside around the lake. Resting on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, the modern city of Tiberias is a shining city. There are many beautiful pictures of the Sea of Galilee with the morning and evening sun. This picture was taken from Tiberias into the sunrise. We can easily think of Jesus praying to his Father through the night and watching the sun come up on such a morning. On a little boat, we are approaching Capernaum. In Capernaum, we find archaeologists have been excavating the house of Peter, which was honored by early Christians and very early used as a church, which tells us something about the importance of Peter to the earliest church. Outside is this olive press. In these formations, the archaeologists have found the foundations of Peter's house and the remnants of the church. Another view of the house shows the plan of rooms as the archaeologists were reconstructing them in the 1980s. Those apostles closest to Jesus all came from Capernaum, which was a thriving fishing village. A 2nd century synagogue in Capernaum has been uncovered and reveals that it was built over the site of an older synagogue, the very one where Jesus taught and healed and antagonized synagogue leaders. A view of Mary Magdalene's hometown across the lake from Capernaum. Jesus did most of his healing and teaching around the shores of this lake. Mount Tabor lies a little to the south of the Sea of Galilee and is distinctive because of its mound-like shape. Mount Tabor was the site of the Transfiguration, which was witnessed by Peter, James, and John, and which made them realize that Jesus was more than a mere human Messiah, as he spoke with Moses and Elijah. Jesus did not shy away from Samaritan towns, but even visited Shechem, where he met the woman at the well who soon evangelized her village. That well is now well below ground, under 2 little booths, which contain stairways down. We have visited this site of Jacob's Well outside of Shechem in other video programs. It has had a church put up around it that was never completed. When Jesus spoke to the woman at the well in Samaria, it was like this one. Now it lies far underground, simply is a measure of all the years that have gone by, with the accumulation of erosion, dust, and debris. In Jericho stands this great sycamore tree, perhaps a descendant of the one that Zacchaeus climbed to see Jesus as he passed through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. Zacchaeus' attempt to see Jesus opened a new life for him when Jesus invited himself to stay at his house. Climbing up the road to Jerusalem from Jericho, one passes the remains of a Crusader building built on the site of the inn that Jesus used as the focus for his story of the Good Samaritan who tended the Jewish victim of robbers. And it is up from Jericho to Jerusalem, up and up all the way. This view is out of the bus window as the road climbs and climbs. Ahead we see the modern buildings on the Bethany side of the Mount of Olives. Jesus walked in and out of Jerusalem when he went there for the feasts, staying with his friends Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in Bethany. Bethany has monuments to the raising of Lazarus, including the site of Lazarus' tomb, which is marked with a plaque and a Muslim minaret. Jesus used common things in his parables, often speaking of fruitfulness, of trees that bear and trees that don't bear fruit. Here, grapefruit trees grow in Jericho. Grapevines and grapes were common figures in Jesus' parables, calling himself the vine and us the branches. We are to bear much fruit. The old vines in Israel, vigorously pruned, still bear heavily the grapes necessary for wine. In the old city of David, also called Mount Zion, is a church dedicated to Peter's denial, St. Peter Gallicantu, meaning cockcrow. It is on the site of the old palace of Caiaphas. Here Peter heard the cock crow and was reminded that what he had just done in denying Jesus, Jesus had foretold. He then, Scripture says, went out and wept bitterly. Because this site was the palace of Caiaphas, we believe that Jesus was held in a dungeon under parts of that palace, and here is that dungeon that is now under the church of St. Peter Gallicantu. Another attraction to tourists today is Hezekiah's tunnel beneath the city of Jerusalem, dug 600 years before Jesus, so that the city might have water during the Assyrian siege. It was part of the Jerusalem that Jesus also knew. This wonderful model of the temple in Jerusalem during the lifetime of Jesus is a stop for the modern tourist. He, Jesus, and the rabbis of his time taught in the porticos surrounding the temple. Here he questioned the teachers of Israel when he was 12 years old, and much to their amazement added to their discussion. It was here that his distraught parents finally found him. The Antonia stood at the northwest corner of the temple. It was at this Roman fort, built to enforce Roman rule in Jerusalem, where Jesus was held by the Roman guard and was interrogated by Pontius Pilate. The guide stands on what was Mount Zion, the hill south of the temple, which was also known as the City of David. The temple's great retaining walls, surmounted by the royal portico, are in the background. Pilgrims entered the doors at the bottom, which led to the great flights of stairs that ascended to the temple level. Greek tombs line the Kidron Valley, dating 300 years earlier than Jesus' time. After they left the upper room where they held the Passover, Jesus and his disciples walked by here on the way to the Garden of Gethsemane on the night before the crucifixion. Jesus went back and forth from Bethany to the temple during Holy Week, staying nights with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. This walkway over the Mount of Olives to Bethany dates back to Jesus' time. Another part of that way to Bethany. The Mount of Olives as it is today, with the Church of the Nations that now stands in the Garden of Gethsemane. That same church at night, with the Greek Orthodox Church looming up in the background. Some of the olive trees in the garden, which may be nearly 2,000 years old. The growth habit seems to be like our lilac, which sends up many shoots from the original plant over the many years. Again, the color has deteriorated on these slides that were taken over 30 years ago, But here, an ancient olive tree in the garden may be nearly 2,000 years old. We see that something like this was where Jesus was kneeling to pray, and drops of blood fell from his anguish. These household jars and furnishings are from Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. Similar to water jars were filled by Jesus, changing water into wine at Cana. Under a convent that is along the Via Dolorosa is the actual piece of Roman pavement near the Antonia where Jesus was mocked by the soldiers. These very stones were in place when Jesus walked this way, and were not far from his flagellation at the pillar, his mocking by the soldiers, and his crowning with thorns. We are visiting the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which today seems to be a conglomeration of buildings dating from many times, the largest part from the effort of the Crusaders to honor the hill of crucifixion. It is strongly linked through the most ancient tradition to the hill where Jesus died and to the burial place of Jesus, which was nearby. A slab of marble within the church marks the place where Jesus was laid when he was removed from the cross. A New Testament era tomb has a rolling stone to close it off. It was a tomb like that Joseph Arimathea allowed Jesus' body to be placed on the eve of the Passover. The Mount of Ascension is at the top of the Mount of Olives. Here, 40 days after the resurrection, the close friends of Jesus witnessed his ascension into a cloud, which took him from their sight. And it was here that two men clothed in white said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." Pictures for this video program are from Google Images, Doubleday's New Atlas of the Bible, Holy Views Incorporated, Israel, a picture book to remember her by, Reader's Digest, Great People of the Bible, Rogerson's Atlas of the Bible, The New Testament in Living Pictures, Biblical Archaeology Review, and Robert Cross.